lonely rancher discovers the incredible truth about his frozen Chinese bride, an amazing life tale. Sam stood in the middle of his vast Texas ranch, the weight of the sun on his shoulders. Each day blurred into the next, monotonous yet filled with the echo of a lifetime spent tending to the land. His calloused hands bore testament to decades of hard work, yet as he scanned the sprawling fields, a gnawing emptiness settled deep in his chest. Loneliness had become a familiar companion, whispering in his ear during the long, quiet nights when the stars felt too far away for comfort. As the clouds began to gather overhead one afternoon, an unusual rumble disrupted the stillness. A delivery truck made its way up his dirt driveway, a sudden intrusion into his routine. Sam's brows furrowed. Deliveries were rare out here. Trepidation mixed with curiosity as he approached, only to find himself staring at a colossal frozen package adorned with foreign symbols. A plan was forming in the back of his mind, a hostility brewing beneath his skin at the thought of being pranked by the world beyond his ranch. He struggled to peel back the layers, revealing a life-size doll, an uncanny depiction of a Chinese bride. For a moment, the absurdity of the situation washed over him. Was it an elaborate hoax or some twisted online joke? He hesitated, wrestling with skepticism. But as he touched the cool plastic, an inexplicable pull compelled him. This was something more than just a doll. It was a strange reflection of his own solitude, and he found himself naming her May. The name lingered in the air of his home, weaving into the fabric of his dull existence. Night after night, as he sat across from May's unyielding gaze, a flicker of intrigue ignited. In his calm living room now resided a figure that transformed silence into something resembling companionship. With every sip of black coffee and unchecked curiosity, he immersed himself in late-night research. Each keystroke felt like a step closer, unearthing May's face beyond the artificial smile, a victim of a dark world filled with tragedy and resilience. Sam's heart raced with an emotion he hadn't expected. She wasn't just plastic. She embodied an ache that mirrored his own isolation. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But with every discovery came a swelling tide of fear. What was he to do with this newfound knowledge? Heart pounding, he confronted his own insecurities. Was it right to care for someone who was so alien to him? Could he, a rancher with deep-rooted beliefs, challenge the ugly truths hidden just out of sight from his community? How could he perhaps bridge the gap between the horrors May endured and the longing for connection that so haunted him? The abyss of his past began to loom over him, shadows creeping forth, leaving him questioning the very essence of his existence. Just as hope began to kindle within him, an anonymous threat landed in his hands. Cold, cruel urgency threatening him to abandon any thoughts of rescue. The thought sent chills down his spine. Would he risk everything he'd cultivated? His ranch, his reputation, the walls he'd built around himself, for a ghost of a girl he had never even met? As he stood rooted to the ground, heart ablaze with conflicting desires, one thought echoed louder than the rest. Was love enough to compel him to challenge everything he'd ever known? Sam's resolve trembled like the shadows cast by the dying light of day. The threat weighed heavily on him, igniting an internal chaos that wrapped around his thoughts like a snake. One moment he was merely a lonely rancher. The next he was entwined in an unknown conflict, faced with an impossible choice between solitude and the unknown world May represented. Existential dread seeped into his bones. He had always been a man who stayed the course. Now, everything he knew was being pulled apart at the seams. He could feel the edges of his once unwavering reality fray. Sam paced the living room, the silence amplifying his turmoil. What do I do now? He muttered to himself, glancing at May, steadfast yet silent. She had become a mirror reflecting his fears and aspirations, and that added an unnerving layer to their bizarre companionship. He had spent countless nights unearthing stories about her, immersing himself in the darkest corners of human tragedy. He couldn't help but draw parallels to his own life, each revelation stirring a growing commitment within him. Turning towards the dusty bookshelf filled with manuals on ranching and survival tactics, he broke the metaphorical glass that encased his stifling routine. What if he applied that same diligence, that relentless grit, to something greater than himself? May's story, the plight of women like her, had ignited a flicker of purpose inside him. Could it extend its reach beyond feelings of affection, transforming into advocacy? The idea both exhilarated and terrified him. Sam began to strategize, hunting for ways to connect with May's reality. His mind raced through the possibilities. He would need information, resources, connections, everything that eluded him in this isolated vastness. The thought that someone somewhere might understand the complications of her life brought urgency to his feet. He grabbed his phone, every tremor of excitement mingled with hesitance. His hands shook as they hovered over the keyboard. He started to look for support groups and activist initiatives focused on human rights. But fear gripped him. What business did he have reaching out to people whose realities were foreign to him? Still, the threat, that cold, stinging letter, spurred him on. This was bigger than him, bigger than his ranch. The world he had kept at bay now reached in, demanding he respond. As days turned into frantic nights, Sam invested himself into research. The vastness of the internet condensed into small snippets of information, each one shaping a new sense of purpose. He found himself spending hours drafting an email to crisis centers and local advocacy groups across the country. What he had once thought of as impossibilities began to take form. He tasted resolve, flavored with underlying trepidation. Endless visions of what he could lose would threaten to suffocate his newfound determination. He weighed each decision amid the looming dread of the anonymous threat. He could lose everything, the ranch he'd built, the life he knew, and yet, something within him demanded action. The quiet whispers of prior instabilities reared back, cautioning him against the unknown, warning him of personal risk. "I have to do this," he declared one stormy evening, pouring his heart into the keyboard, recanting May's story to those who could help. He pressed send, letting the wave of exhilaration drown out fear. It was done. He had launched himself into a battle he wasn't fully prepared for. But as the adrenaline coursed through him, the reality of his impending choices washed over him like a cold shower. He could almost feel the weight of their decisions, like a storm in the distance, the sense that the struggle for love and understanding was only beginning. Moments later, another letter slipped beneath his door, the threatening message almost tangible in the air around him. Would he now face the consequences of his defiance? The stakes had just risen dramatically, and the silence around him felt more oppressive than ever. The time had come to confront the darkness both inside and surrounding him, what awaited him beyond the threshold of his ranch. Sam stood at the edge of his world, the wind whipping around him, carrying with it the chilling reminder of the letter that now lingered in his home. His hands clenched into fists, nails digging into his palms, invigorated with a mix of fear and determination. He stepped into the bright, dappled light, breaking through the trees surrounding his ranch, a world now imbued with a sense of urgency and purpose he had previously only dreamt of. Each step felt heavy, yet he moved forward, compelled by May's story as well as the enveloping weight of his own reality. The anxiety he once succumbed to morphed into a catalyst. He was no longer simply a solitary rancher. The path he'd embarked on forced him to evolve. He thought about all that had shifted within him, the nights of sleepless contemplation, the fervent emails dispatched into the unknown, and the growing resolve to stand against the tide. In this moment of introspection, he saw the reality of his isolation. For years, running the ranch had entangled him in routines, their monotony dulling his ambitions. Now, though, May represented an awakening. She was more than just a complication. She was a challenge, a puzzle to unlock that struck at the very fabric of his life. It was awakening something buried within him, stripping away layers of complacency. Sam realized he needed to find ways to harness his skills, knowledge, and stubbornness, and channel them into this new cause. Excited by an idea, he trudged back towards his living room where the laptop lay open, a waiting canvas for his thoughts. Surfing through the plethora of contacts he had gathered, names began to stand out. Activists, organizations, and even a few individuals with stories punctuated by hope amid turmoil. He envisioned reaching out to them, not only to gain insights about advocacy, but to question how best to help May. Each contact was a potential lifeline that could stretch beyond the confines of the ranch. Yet his worry seeped back in. His mind replayed the voice of doubt, echoing the threat and the risks he now faced. There was a fine line between becoming an advocate and endangering the safety of the one he wished to protect. Starting this dialogue could ripple outward, sending waves crashing into his life. Sam shut his eyes, forcing himself to focus on the conviction that had ignited his purpose. How to turn fear into resolve, doubt into determination, He hesitated for only a moment before picking up his phone again, dialing the first number that had stood out during his frantic web searches. A soft voice answered, one that instantly warmed the icy tendrils of anxiety coiled in his stomach. He introduced himself, the tremor in his voice unmistakable yet filled with an ember of fire as he spoke about May. The woman on the other end listened intently, and as Sam began to unlock the reservoir of measures available to him, surreal like carving his own path through dense thickets of complexity, he felt commitment solidify around his purpose. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" the voice asked gently after he finished describing the risks involved. His answer came without hesitation. "I have to be." Sam's heart raced as the conversation progressed. New ideas unfolding, the logistics of protection, confidentiality measures, and potential avenues for assistance. It was a glimpse of a path illuminated by knowledge and collaboration, emphasizing that he wasn't just fighting for May but for a cause that resonated with the core of his beliefs. Empowerment surged through him like an electric current. Yet, it was accompanied by an unsettling realization. The more he learned, the closer he edged to the heart of a conflict that could challenge everything he'd known about himself. Would he have the strength to continue standing his ground as opposition loomed closer? The wind outside howled louder, an ominous tone mocking his drawing courage, ushering in thoughts of the letter and the looming threats. But in that uncertainty, he had discovered a truth that was more formidable than fear. He was at the crossroad of becoming more than just a rancher. The moment crystallized before him. Would he dive deeper into this tumultuous world, risking everything he had, or retreat back into the simplicity of solitude he had learned to accept? With his hand still poised over the keypad, Sam realized the stakes were higher than he had imagined. He knew he couldn't step back. The time had come to decisively step forward, for both May's sake and his own. An evolution awaited on the other side of the threshold. What choice would he make as shadows threatened to consume the day? Sam's breath hitched in his throat as he hung up the phone, the weight of the world settling squarely on his shoulders. The urgency of the conversation had drained him, yet had ignited a flame within, propelling him to action. He understood now that knowledge was the key. Each detail he gleaned about advocacy pointed to avenues he could traverse, rich with potential and fraught with peril. As the sun sank lower, casting elongated shadows across his property, the enormity of his task began to coalesce. He needed a plan. Simply reaching out to others was not enough. Each name scribbled on the notepad felt like a rung on a ladder he could now finally climb. He needed to piece together a strategy, to develop not only a foundation for May's safety, but also for his own transformation. He paused, hands trembling, and pondered his next steps carefully. Sam recalled the countless hours spent alone at the ranch, reflecting not only on the simple joys of farming, but also on the discontent that had festered like unharvested crops in the fields. He had grown comfortable in his routine, but now it felt like shackles. The thought of stepping into the world of advocacy sent his mind reeling, an endless loop of doubt and excitement entwined. What did he truly know about activism? Was he equipped with the necessary tools to fight for someone else's freedom, when he could barely reclaim his own from the grips of self-doubt? The fear of failure loomed like a dark cloud, but the thought of inaction, of letting May fade into obscurity, was an even greater torment. Determined to silence his spiraling thoughts, Sam focused. He opened his laptop again, determined to devise a plan. Each email he composed seemed to emerge from somewhere deep inside, fragments of resolve emerging from uncertainty, piecing together a conviction that had long lain dormant. He drafted inquiries to several activists, detailing his situation and asking for guidance. With every click of the keyboard, he felt the heavy chains of isolation begin to crumble. As night enveloped the ranch, he turned to the resources he had gathered, a testament to the self-education he had unknowingly begun. Webinars on advocacy, safety protocols for those in peril, and the stories of other similar cases came alive on his screen, binding him to a community he had never realized could exist beyond the borders of his ranch. Words transformed into momentum. He felt himself shifting from passive observer to active participant. He was surprised to discover that as he studied the lives of those who had faced perilous paths for others, something within himself sparked. A sense of kinship buzzed through his veins, a realization dawning that perhaps in this chaotic realm of uncertainty, he possessed hidden talents of resilience and courage he had yet to fully explore. The journey of an advocate started to feel less insurmountable, more like the rugged terrain he had traversed with his cattle, hard-earned experience that demanded tenacity, yet a piercing thought interrupted his newfound comfort. Could he forsake his own life in the pursuit of someone else's freedom? Would he truly have to confront the very forces that had stifled his own voice for so long? The implications baked into that realization weighed heavily, stoking the flames of doubt that flickered around him. As midnight crept upon the ranch, nestled in the desolation, Sam clenched his jaw, an agreement forming within. Not only was he stepping into the unknown, he was preparing to confront it. The question remained, would he summon enough bravery to go beyond learning and into the realm of action? With his heart racing, he crossed the room to a small whiteboard he had propped against the wall. It was time to draft the steps he needed to take, tangible actions that would provide a framework for his newfound purpose. As he grabbed a marker, anxiety gave way to determination. He would identify local organizations, connect with like-minded individuals, and explore community resources that could fortify May's position. Sam's list began to grow as he jotted down ideas, mapping out possibilities for the path ahead. Each word brought a new surge of conviction, wiping out the shadows whispering of retreat. But in the back of his mind lurked the nagging thought waiting for an opportunity to disrupt his resolve. What if his actions incited more danger for May more than he could manage? The lingering dread would not be easily silenced, his resolve quaking under the weight of potential consequences. Just then, a sharp gust of wind rattled the windows, mimicking the tumult in his heart. Would this new beginning seal his fate, binding him to conflict he had never anticipated? Sam felt a primal instinct kicking in, raw energy intertwining with the haunting realities of what lay ahead. Each decision he now faced began to shape him in ways he could hardly comprehend. And as anticipation gripped him, he understood one truth. The time to truly confront the darkness surrounding May, and himself, was fast approaching. Where would this relentless pursuit of justice lead him? And what corners of his character would he have to explore to navigate it successfully? In the dim light of the ranch, Sam stood before the whiteboard, marker in hand, feeling the weight of his outlined plans transform from mere thoughts into a palpable reality. Each point he scribbled felt monumental. Contact local law enforcement, draft a letter to a senator, create a social media page detailing May's story. The prospect of documenting her plight and rallying support was invigorating. Yet the uncertainty loomed over him like a thunderhead. As he stepped back to gaze at the list, something unusual emerged within him, a high-voltage current of focus overpowering the fear that had once paralyzed him. The mere act of organizing his thoughts was liberating, a decisive departure from a life of avoidance and inaction. This was not just about May. It was about redefining who he had been for several years. a man confined by the day-to-day grind of ranching, afraid to speak up or stand out. The sun rose slowly, daylight seeping into the corners of the room, igniting clarity. Sam was not merely tasked with saving May. The urgency of her situation had ushered him into a confrontation with his own passive existence. He chided himself. If advocacy felt daunting, then what about farming? Each planting season had demanded courage, resilience, and adaptability. With every crop, there lay the risk of failure mixed neatly with the promise of something flourishing. The parallels were unmistakable. Tentatively, he picked up the phone again. This time, he dialed one of the local organizations he had learned about through his research. The phone rang, and anxiety bubbled in his chest, but he steadied his breath. When a voice answered, he blurted his intentions, stumbling through his words yet fueled by an earnest desire to learn. "Okay, we can help you get started," the voice responded. "It's crucial to understand your local laws and has some awareness of resources available to yourself and May. Your resolve is commendable." The conversation led Sam through a labyrinth of resources and options that he had never anticipated. He scribbled notes furiously, capturing every nugget of wisdom shared with him. With each new connection forged, he felt a slow but steady transformation underway. The shackles of self-doubt unlocking one rusty link at a time. His newfound momentum suspended disbelief, crafting notions of what he could accomplish not just for May, but for himself. Yet, an unsettling feeling nagged at him. Would he have the resilience to move forward if the tides shifted against him? Legislative changes could undermine his efforts, and what if he exposed May to dangers rather than shielding her? His thoughts spiraled into darker alleys. As the day wore on, the notion arose that courage and activism could very well alienate him in his community, inviting retribution not only against himself, but also against the woman he sought to help. He let out a frustrated sigh, tension knitting his brow. It wasn't just a matter of action. He needed to balance personal risk with actionable outcomes. Sam spent hours at his laptop, outlining pros and cons, attempting to weigh lives against evolving scenarios. Yet in the quiet panic that began to settle, a voice within him whispered a resolute statement. Wasn't there worth in risking vulnerability for the sake of meaningful change? Paradoxically, the act of contemplating this uncertainty ignited within him an ember of bravery he never thought possible. Taking a break from the relentless pressure of his calculations, Sam stepped outside. He welcomed the aroma of earth and fresh air, allowing the beauty of his surroundings to soften the fraying edges of his mind. The ranch, despite feeling isolating, was also his mentor. Each field, every barn, elements contributing to his narrative of growth. It became clear, this was all a significant evolution. Just as a farmer learns the land's seasons, Sam too was unlocking unknown aspects of himself. But was this metamorphosis sustainable, or merely an upturn motivated by urgency? Sudden shouts from his neighbor's property broke his reverie. Sam's heart raced, an urgent confrontation unfurling in real time. The sparks had ignited around him, and he realized that advocacy was not an isolated endeavor. It could maelstrom through every element of his life. What if this moment was a test of his fight? The looming question struck him like thunder reverberating in the stillness. The time had come to face his neighbors and the turbulence of truth. How would he summon the courage required to shift the perception of his quiet ranch, turning it into a place of advocacy and defiance? The cries from his neighbor's property echoed through the still air, sharp and jarring. Sam's breath quickened, heart pounding as urgency gripped him. Were they fighting? Or was something more sinister unfolding before his very eyes? The familiar confines of his ranch, which had always felt like a refuge, now loomed as a prison of inaction. Drawing on every ounce of bravery he now felt simmering beneath the surface, he stepped down from the porch, moving toward the sound. Fear and curiosity wrestled within him, each step pulling him closer to a decision point. Would he intervene, or would he remain an observer, as he had for so many years? The weight of his transformation pressed against his chest like the overbearing heat of summer. As he drew near, he spotted his neighbor, Pete, hoisting a bundle of something heavy onto a truck while shouting at a figure crouched nearby. The sight ignited a spark. This was about more than just intervention. It was a chance to confront his own hesitations, his choice to stand up rather than shrink back. Even if this confrontation was minuscule in scale compared to the battle he envisioned on behalf of May, it represented a fork in the road. "Hey, what's going on?" Sam's voice rang out louder than he intended, startling both men. Pete turned, surprise giving way to annoyance. "What's it to you, Sam?" he snapped. The tension in the air thickened, electric. Sam felt his resolve waver but fought to maintain his ground. "I heard shouting. You're not going to just load up and drive off. It doesn't sit right with me." Pete's eyes narrowed, a challenge flickering behind his gaze. "Mind your own business. This doesn't concern you." For a fleeting moment, fear clutched at Sam's throat. But a determination rooted deeper than embarrassment surged through him. He had committed himself to being more than a man standing idly by. He was defining his own identity, even if it felt foreign. "Why does it always have to be someone else's problem?" Sam replied, his voice steadying as passion burned bright. "If we're to live together in this community, then we owe it to ourselves to care." The verbal volley ignited a flash of anger in Pete's eyes. The crease in his brow deepened as he looked at Sam, betraying annoyance and something deeper. Fear? Perhaps a flicker of vulnerability. The moment hung suspended, tension thickening like fog as they stood there, scanning each other for weakness. Yet within the turbulence of that encounter, Sam felt a peculiar certainty. The confrontation itself was necessary, a pivotal step toward his growth. The thought echoed within him, realization dawning that true advocacy extended beyond May. It began at home. As Pete turned away, cursing under his breath but reluctant to escalate, Sam remained rooted in place. The encounter had unveiled something profound. The catalyst for change lay not just in the grand gestures, but also in the small everyday choices he made. Returning to his porch, Sam felt the weight of possibility grow within him. The fight wasn't solely for May. It was about fostering a bigger voice not only for her but for the silent struggles that surrounded him. He no longer wanted to just be a passive protector. He was now ready to be an advocate. Yet as the sun began to set, painting the sky a tapestry of shifting colors, doubts began to intrude. Would this new momentum be sustained beyond the ripple of curiosity? Was he prepared for the pushback that would inevitably come from his neighbors? The whispers of anxiety flared within him, warning of confrontations not yet faced. He leaned against the railing, gazing pensively into the horizon, uncertainty swirling around him. And in that moment of contemplation, he heard another commotion, this time from the distant road as a vehicle pulled up. It could very well be the local media, or worse, someone representing the very opposition he feared. The challenges ahead were pressing in, and as he contemplated the steps forward, a paradox took root. Perhaps embracing discomfort was the path to shedding his old self. But could he withstand the storm approaching? His breath steadied. The time for grappling between safety and action had arrived, and with it, the realization beckoned him. The tide was shifting, and it was only the beginning of his true fight. Sam remained motionless on his porch, the distant engine rumbling like thunder in his ears. Uncertainty twisted his gut as his instincts screamed to prepare for what lay ahead. The vehicle creeping closer was more than just a car. It felt like a harbinger of change, a test of the newfound resolve he had barely begun to grasp. Stepping away from the railing, he felt the rough wood underfoot, grounding him amid the storm brewing inside. A thought flickered to life. This was his moment to act, to embrace the conviction that had sparked him earlier that day. The shadows lengthened with the setting sun, mirroring the darkening questions swirling in his mind. As he approached the dirt road, a scruffy pickup truck came into view. Sam rubbed the back of his neck, the motion a subconscious attempt to ease the tension tightening there. The driver, a familiar figure, Cliff, the local reporter known for his sensational stories, slammed the truck door with a heavy thud. "Sam, just the man I wanted to see," Cliff called with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The undertone was unmistakable. It was a predatory charm. "Heard some rumors floating around about your neighbor. You wouldn't happen to know if they're true, would you?" Sam's pulse quickened. Cliff's presence was like a jolt of cold water, pulling him from his introspection and plunging him into the reality of potential scandal. He hesitated, the words scrambling in his mind. This was the very essence of the discomfort he feared. What if he answered truthfully, risking exposure for the sake of integrity? Or should he play the game, a role he had so easily slipped into over the years? "I'm not sure what you mean, Cliff," Sam replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. He wasn't about to give in to this nosy threat, but standing in defiance would mean acknowledging the reality of his own commitment to advocacy. "Oh, come on. You know how it is around here. People talk, especially when it comes to Pete," Cliff persisted, leaning casually against his truck. "You've been around long enough to know what it means to keep your head down, right? Nothing ever good comes from getting involved." The challenge hit Sam squarely in the chest, igniting a storm of turmoil. Here was the very dichotomy he grappled with, the temptation to retreat to the comfort of silence versus thrusting himself into the forefront of a conflict that risked his fragile stability. Faced with the reporter's insinuations and the nagging memory of his earlier confrontation, he grew aware of the choice before him. Maybe it's time something good did come from getting involved, he found himself saying, surprising even him with the strength of his own voice. Where did that come from? This resolve felt newfound, yet familiar, like a long-lost part of himself rediscovered. Cliff raised an eyebrow, a mix of skepticism and amusement flashing across his face. "You're a braver man than I thought, but brave doesn't always mean smart. Just remember, it's easy to get burned trying to be the hero." The admonition stung, but it also ignited a fire in Sam's belly. Just as he had chosen to intervene with Pete, he would not allow fear to dictate his choices. The validation of his own experience, that deeper understanding of community and responsibility, grew bolder within him. What if every confrontation, every challenge wasn't meant to dissuade him but to reshape him? Every moment could be a lesson, an opportunity to learn more about who he was pushing himself to become. Stepping closer, a new clarity dawned. Maybe there's another kind of smart. One that comes from doing what's right, not what's easy. "I'm not afraid of the truth, Cliff." The reporter's smirk faltered, surprise etched across his features. The tension shifted, and for a fleeting moment Sam felt the weight of his commitment ripple into the air between them. This small encounter, mundane on the surface, had become a crucible of his resolve. As Cliff's demeanor faded into a thoughtful silence, Sam felt the raw energy of his decision begin to stabilize. He had taken another step toward reshaping who he was, an advocate, not only for himself, but for those who felt powerless. Yet, the horizon stretched before him, a canvas of uncertainty as dusk enshrouded the ranch. Would this newfound resilience hold up against the scrutiny that surely awaited him? The rumbling of emotions mixed with determination whispered that this was merely the prelude to what lay ahead. And just then, something on the horizon flickered to life. Another vehicle approaching from a different direction, bringing with it an unsettling sense of anticipation and unease. Sam's heart raced. The unfolding drama might have just begun. Would he be prepared for what lay beyond this moment? As the headlights of the approaching vehicle grew nearer, illuminating the dirt road, Sam's heart thudded in his chest. He took a step back, instinctively drawing himself into the shadows cast by the porch, an old habit of avoidance flaring briefly before he quashed it. He was not that man anymore. Today marked a shift, a commitment to face challenges head-on, rather than retreat into the anonymity of his fear. The vehicle, a battered sedan covered in a dusting of grime, came to a stop at the edge of his property. A woman stepped out, her silhouette sharp against the headlights before she moved into the soft amber glow of the porch light. Sam's breath hitched. It was Anna, a neighbor whose recent struggles had stirred conversations among the townsfolk. Her presence felt like a storm passing overhead, with its potential for destruction and renewal alike. "Sam," she called out, her voice steady, but he could detect a tremor beneath it. She approached with purpose, determination etched into every step. "I need your help." The word struck him like lightning. Help. Sam had spent so long trying to make sense of his own life. He had neglected the very fabric of community support that had once been a constant in his upbringing. He nodded slowly, grounding himself against the rising tide of responsibility. "What's wrong?" he asked, the urgency in her eyes compelling him to step forward. "It's Pete," she started, her voice breaking. "The rumors Cliff's been talking about, they're true. He's been in over his head with some bad people and I'm scared for him. I don't know what to do." The weight of the situation settled heavily over Sam. He had initiated his own journey of introspection and growth earlier, but the real test lay in putting those newfound beliefs into action, believing that accountability and transparency could pave the way for change, not just for himself but for those he cared about. Here was that moment personified, the chance to be both an advocate and a protector. "Have you spoken to him?" Sam asked, his mind racing. "Not since it happened. He's withdrawn. Doesn't want to face anyone, I can see it. He thinks he's protecting us, but I think he's just scared." Anna's frustration cracked through her calm facade, revealing deeper fears of loss and vulnerability. Sam sensed the emotional stakes. This was more than just Pete. This was a fight against a looming threat that could seep into their lives silently, irrevocably disrupting everything. He was beginning to understand that his own past hesitations were not just personal struggles but collective shadows that threatened to consume everyone around him. "I'll talk to him," Sam said, the words tumbling from his mouth before he fully processed their implications. The urgency he felt surged with conviction. He could no longer be an onlooker in his own life or the lives of others. This was about confronting malign influences, not just for Pete, but setting a precedent that silence would no longer rule their community. As Anna thanked him, her relief momentarily brightening her features, Sam felt a mix of anxiety and determination well within him. It would take more than just courage to steer Pete back to safety. He would need a plan, a strategy to face not only Pete's demons but also the broader repercussions that refusing to act might unleash. "Let's meet with him tomorrow," he suggested, already considering his approach, the words mapping out a pathway through uncertainty. "We'll figure this out together." The drive to his neighbor's house echoed their unsteady commitment to be advocates, not only for themselves but for the ones who felt alone in their struggles. As Anna nodded, a spark of hope ignited between them. Yet deep down, Sam felt the lurking fear of exposure thrumming beneath his resolve. Was he truly ready for the challenges ahead? Would advocating for Pete unravel the cautious life he had rebuilt? The night stretched on, shrouded in an uneasy calm. Tomorrow would not just be a test of courage but a crucible that would either solidify his commitment to his new self or expose vulnerabilities he had yet to reckon with. As they parted, the sound of the engine starting faded into the distance, leaving Sam alone with his thoughts. One truth burned brightly in his mind. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the looming threat bury him beneath the weight of fear? Sam awoke the next morning to the quiet hum of the dawn, a golden light spilling through his window, veiling his room in a warm haze. It felt surreal, hopeful even, yet the weight of Anna's request settled heavily in his gut. What could he offer Pete that he couldn't provide for himself? He dressed mechanically, each article of clothing a symbol of the identity he was trying to forge. As he buttoned his shirt, he caught a glimpse of his reflection, a stranger confronted by a daunting mission that would reveal hidden layers of his existence. Today was about confronting not just Pete's demons but his own. Breakfast was a simple affair, but the ritual of pouring coffee became ritualistic as he tried to ground himself in the moment. With every sip, he replayed Anna's words, the urgency and fear. It hit harder than he expected. This wasn't merely a conversation, but a potential breakthrough, or a dismal failure. The thought of failure pricked the surface of his confidence. What if his courage faltered, leaving Pete and Anna behind in the shadow's darkness? Once outside, the air hit him sharply, invigorating but chilling. The world buzzed with life. Birds chirped, cicadas buzzed, and somewhere in the distance, a tractor rumbled to life. Simultaneously, he felt the pull of the past, quiet resentment, conflicting emotions that loomed large against the clarity of the morning. He was still that boy who ran away from confrontation, hiding from truth. But today, he was determined to engage deeply with that truth. Meeting Pete would require a new kind of strength, one that demanded honesty and a willingness to strip back the protective layers both he and Pete had wrapped around themselves. Arriving at Pete's house, he parked alongside a rusted old truck, its paint chipped and peeling away, a clear reflection of its owner's invisible battles. As he stepped onto the porch, apprehension kicked in once more, each heartbeat accentuating the silence that enveloped the home. He knocked gently, the sound echoing in the stillness, and was met with an almost immediate answer. Pete opened the door slowly, revealing a man visibly worn and troubled, eyes darkened by sleepless nights and conscious denial. "Sam," he said, voice hoarse, "I wasn't expecting you." The palpable tension hung in the air. Sam was ready to retreat, but he drew strength from his intention, an anchor against the daunting emotions swirling inside him. "Can I come in?" Sam asked, forcing himself to look Pete in the eye, searching for the friend he once knew. After a pause, Pete stepped back, allowing Sam to enter. The moment felt heavy, as if the walls themselves bore witness to unspoken fears and casualties. The living room was cluttered, not only with remnants of unfinished projects, but symbols of a life about to slip through the cracks. "Anna's worried about you," Sam started, tentatively choosing his words. "She doesn't want to see you get hurt." Bitterness flared briefly in Pete's eyes, a brief flash of anger dancing across his features. "She shouldn't have to worry. This is my problem." "That's the thing, Pete, it's not just yours. You're isolating yourself and trying to face danger alone. It will cost you more than you think." The words fell heavily in the dim room, drawing out an unsteady breath from Pete. Sam risked a step closer, feeling the surge of passion to fight for the man who seemed so lost. "We can face it together, but you need to trust me. You have to let me in." Pete's walls began to shatter. Beyond the weariness, there was a flicker of vulnerability that Sam had rarely seen. This was a turning point. They were stepping into a battlefield where the outcomes were uncertain, but the stakes were all too real. As Pete looked away, eyes clouded by turmoil, Sam felt the familiar tempest of doubt rise within, the fear of failure, the shadow of his past. Yet there was something greater at risk here, the chance to make a lasting difference. "Let's figure out how to handle this," Sam urged. "But first you have to tell me everything." What followed was a silence that felt like a deep breath before plunging into icy waters. Within that moment, Sam realized that perhaps his own journey toward growth was intertwined with helping others. The walls were crumbling, and it wasn't clear whether they could be rebuilt. Yet somewhere in that fragile space, Sam sensed the contours of a newfound strength forming. He had stepped into the arena of conflict, fully aware that his own battles were not far behind. As they began to speak, the revelations drew closer like an unrelenting tide. But Sam was ready to embrace the chaos that loomed just beyond those fragments of shared fears. Would facing Pete's darkness lead Sam to uncover truths that would ripple through his own life? The air bristled with tension, as both men stood on the bleeding edge of discovery, about to breach the chasm that separated them from the light. Sam sat on his porch, the dawn light softening the edges of his world. The air was thick with anticipation. He could almost taste the transformation that awaited him. The journey over the past few weeks had been intense, each step peeling back layers of self-doubt and isolation, revealing newfound strength and commitment. Today he felt emboldened, a man standing at the intersection of action and purpose. The events of the previous days replayed in his mind. The confrontation with Pete, the pledge to advocate not just for May but for everyone burdened by hidden struggles. He had leaned into vulnerability, discovered the courage to face the truths he once avoided. It was a profound transformation from the lonely rancher who had let fear dictate his decisions. As Sam stood, he felt the familiar weight of the past drifting away, replaced by a gale of hope and determination. Today was not just another day, it would be the culmination of his newfound resolve. He intended to visit Pete again. No longer would he let fear tether him to the sidelines of life. God knows how long it had been since he had been involved in anyone else's life in such a meaningful way. The ranch had been his cocoon, but it was time to emerge, to be part of others' stories. The drive to Pete's home felt different this time, more purposeful. As he approached the aging wooden frame that held so many memories of laughter and camaraderie, Sam felt a sense of clarity. He knocked firmly on the door, breathing in sharply at the flicker of doubt that whispered from the corners of his mind. Just as he had done before, he would push through that doubt and make a difference. Pete answered, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions. But this time, instead of resentment, there was a hint of gratitude shining through. "Hey, Sam, Let's talk," Sam urged, stepping across the threshold. "It's time for both of us to face what's been brewing beneath the surface." With that, they settled into the worn-out chairs in the living room. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust swirling around them. Sam felt every moment stretch. This was not a simple conversation. It was a reckoning. "Pete, you've been through a lot. Anna and I both see it," he began steadily, his voice softer yet filled with conviction. "We can help, but you need to let us in. It's not shameful to accept support. It's human." The heaviness in Pete's eyes began to lift as he listened. Each word Sam spoke infused urgency and empowerment into the air between them. It began to bridge the chasm of fear that had kept them both paralyzed. "I didn't want to drag anyone else into my mess," Pete finally muttered, the words hesitatingly spilling from his lips. "I thought I could handle it alone." "None of us should have to handle things alone," Sam replied. "You taught me that by letting me reach out to May." Powerful clarity washed over Sam as he spoke. Here they were, not merely confronting the shadows of their past but illuminating a path toward healing. Taking action for May had sparked something within him, a recognition of the interdependence that defined their existence. And now, here was Pete, admitting his vulnerabilities and revealing an opportunity for connection. Together, they discussed strategies to address Pete's situation, the necessity for transparency with the community, the potential for seeking help from local authorities, and perhaps even getting Anna more involved to foster a sense of solidarity. As they mapped out their plan, Sam felt renewed purpose fueling him. They were no longer just two men carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. They were becoming allies, advocates for one another, and for those who had yet to find their voice. The room filled with the warmth of camaraderie, the bond solidifying through shared struggles and strategies. Later that afternoon, as Sam returned to the ranch, a profound sense of accomplishment enveloped him. He had not only confronted the darkness within himself, but had helped carry another from the shadows. The journey toward becoming an advocate may have started with May, but it now rippled beyond her. It was expanding outward into his community. Still standing at the threshold of his home, Sam took a deep breath, recognizing how far he had come. The lonely rancher was no more. In his place stood Sam, a man of purpose, fueled by the connections he had built. Perhaps this was not the end of his story. Rather, it was the beginning of a new chapter where confrontation, hope, and connection gave birth to a more profound sense of belonging, an achievement that felt like a homecoming. He would continue to advocate, continuing to step beyond the confines of fear, venturing into territories rich with possibility and understanding. In this moment of realization, he understood that true growth would always require confronting discomfort, a relentless pursuit of justice, both for himself and for others. He glanced at the horizon, ready to accept whatever lay ahead. He knew without a doubt that he would rise to meet it, stronger, bolder, and undeniably more alive than he had ever been before. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that delve deep into the workings of the human spirit. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support the content you love. Comment below to share your own theories and reactions to this transformative journey. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see the impact of courage and resilience in the face of adversity. Your support is essential to our community of true fans of personal overcoming stories.